Welcome to Heart Power Conversations. Today, my guest is Lisa Quigley. She is a visionary writer, a quantum hypnotist, psychic channeler, and intergalactic witch. She is a starseed mystic who cheekily calls her practice glitch witchery. And she's here to support all other glitch witches across the globe who are ready to remember who they are and claim their glitches as a way to embody their most magnetic power. And in case you can't tell from this beautiful description, this bio, that Lisa is very gifted with words, a beautiful writer, a wonderful creative channel, and an inspiration to many of us. So welcome, Lisa. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so glad you said yes to Heart Power Conversation with me.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here and so glad you invited me. And I'm excited for our conversation. We always have fun Instagram DM conversations. So I'm excited to bring it more public.
It's time. So I think everyone is probably wondering, Glitch Witch, how did this come about? What exactly does it mean? Can you decode a little bit of your creative power and your medicine for us?
Absolutely. So that was not always my Instagram handle. My Instagram handle's actually gone through a few iterations. I think the first time I created this account, I was Irreverent Witch. And then as I started talking more about creativity, I changed it to Creativity Witch. And then I think it was last spring, I started to have some shifts and realizations. And I was in this reading mentorship container where we were all kind of like practicing our readings with each other and growing in our mysticism. And one of the exercises that our teacher gave us was to make just a list of keywords that were really exciting to us. She called it bio keywords. And I was just making a list, not trying to make sense, just writing down words that were really catching my interest. And when I was looking through this list, I saw the word glitch, and all of a sudden, like the words glitch witch popped into my head. And I was like, oh my God, like things started to fall into place. I was like, instantly changed my handle, went and saved the Glitch Witch podcast, and changed even my website. I bought the domain, theglitchwitch.com, and it started to fall in from there. I didn't exactly know in that moment exactly what was happening. I was just like, this is what I have to change it to. And so I'll just break down what it means to me. It's, again, like I said in that bio, it's a little cheeky. It's mercurial, it's trickstery. And the way I think of it is that for many of us who are interested in things like witchcraft or mysticism or magic or star seeds or channeling or psychic work or anything that's a little bit off the beaten path for quote unquote maybe like normal people or whatever, or society or culture, we are often people who grew up feeling like outsiders or weirdos, or like we didn't fit in, or misfits or freaks. We're also people who've had big dreams, and a lot of times I find that we're people who we have a big vision for the world, for the planet, for humanity. We really feel, maybe even as misfits in our families or in our cultures, but even at the world at large, you might feel like being a human feels really dense and unwieldy. We might feel like, I don't know, like we don't understand human customs or human culture, or why humans are so obsessed with war and fighting. Like we might just feel completely disoriented being here at times. And to me, this sense of not fitting in, or all the things that made us misfits or that made us weirdos, I've started calling our glitches. And again, it's a little bit cheeky because if we're thinking of reality as a system that's currently malfunctioning and we don't fit into it, I see that as actually a good thing. And I see us as being this overall, to be really cliche, a glitch in the matrix. We're like a glitch in this malfunctioning reality that isn't a mistake. We are actually here to like
Break it
glitch
down.
the
Take
system,
it down.
yeah, and make it into this world that, is more loving, kind,
Yeah,
heart led, heart centered. So that's what it means to me. That's the short-ish version.
it's beautiful. It's just beautiful. And I think it's the way that the renaming, it happens for a lot of us. It happened to me, happened to a lot of clients of mine and friends of mine, because in the very beginning, when we start, we don't quite have the essence of what it is, like what the path will actually look like, what our focus will be. And it's only revealed once we get started. So you're a perfect example of that, I think. What did you start with? Was tarot the first thing that you started with, or what was
Yeah,
the gateway drug that brought you into working in this field?
well, the true gateway drug, even before my Instagram account, because I started this Instagram account in 2019 when I was finally ready to start talking about this stuff. I will say, like, I grew up super religious and in a fundamentalist religious environment that I never felt I fit in with. And I've always been a seeker. I've always been trying to figure out what's going on with reality. And so, like, pinpointing a true gateway drug is really difficult, but I would say it was actually yoga. When I was 26, that was when I found yoga. I started practicing all the time and became a teacher and started learning about more like what you might call like Eastern mysticism or Eastern practices. And along that path, I got my first tarot deck, had no idea what I was looking at. I was like so interested in it, but like when I would look at the cards, I'm like, this makes no sense. I do not understand what these cards are saying, but I still felt this draw toward it and would collect decks anyways, even though I was like, I don't get this. In 2019, and I feel like this is true for a lot of us, a lot of people I've talked to, it was like a switch turned on. And again, my path is really spiral. Like, I've always been interested in these things. Sometimes it's been, most of the time, it's been very underground and secret. I'm just reading books on tarot or books on witchcraft and just not really telling anyone. In 2019, I was like, I want to learn tarot for real. And I am going to do it. And I started pulling cards every day. I started pulling cards in front of my husband. So he knew I loved tarot, but I still felt really embarrassed to ever be seen with tarot cards, even in front of my husband, who, like, when I ultimately talked about it to him about it one day, he was like, yeah, duh. He's like, I already know all this about you. You think you're hiding it. I can see you. You're right there. But yeah, I started pulling cards every day. And then when I started doing that, I was like, I want a space to talk about this interest. And I didn't feel like I could do that on my personal Instagram. So I started a separate Instagram to talk about it. And I think tarot was the thing I was talking about the most in the beginning because I was really diving deep into learning it, taking classes and things like this. And I knew actually that I wanted to do some sort of reading with people, but I don't want to do just like regular tarot readings. Which who knows why I was like, it's something else. And then I'm also a writer and I started working with tarot for my creative process. And that's when I started talking about creativity and the tarot together. And it's all kind of evolved from there. Yeah.
Amazing. Amazing. So there's a deck that you just posted about that I have never heard of, never seen. And I saw one of the cards on there and I was like, I want to know more about it. And actually about the journey that you're currently on as the next iteration of the next glitch that you're here to publish into the matrix, to push
Yeah.
through to the matrix.
So
Um,
which deck is that? Which one
the
do you mean the Galactic Heritage?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So they're not actually a tarot deck. They're not really an oracle deck
Or
either. I don't know what to call them. They're called the Galactic Heritage cards. There's 108 cards. It's a deck that was channeled by Lisa Royal Holt, which is a channeler I love. It's funny because I talk about all this stuff and I'm really into it, but I'm also really pretty skeptical and pretty like, I bring a lot of discernment to which people I'm listening to, because there's a lot of stuff out there and a lot of people saying a lot of stuff. So this isn't to make people better or worse. I think of it more as resonance. So when somebody is saying words or sharing teachings that have a resonance of truth in me, they're the ones I'm drawn to. They're the ones I pay more attention to. And Lisa Royal Holt is one of those people, and she has written a lot. She has a book on galactic history, which was my first introduction to that topic. And I remember reading that book, like, I'm not sure if I'm reading fiction or if I'm reading something true or if I'm reading, like, what is this? It's so weird and so interesting. And it has that resonance of truth for me. And Lisa has also written a lot about contact with ultra dimensional, multidimensional beings, and also about how a lot of times humans kind of misunderstand what contact even is. And a lot of it's happening internally and in ways that humans don't recognize. I just find she's like a really fascinating person if anyone's interested. But she has a multidimensional consciousness that she channels who calls themselves Germain, not connected to Saint Germain. It's a different consciousness. And Germain is like an expert on galactic history. And so Lisa channeled this deck of galactic heritage cards through Germain, or Germain channeled, Lisa channeled, however that, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so I've started working, I've been studying this deck for the last year because it's really weird and it's really almost impossible to learn how to use it without just doing readings for people, because the readings depend on what cards show up, what the cards mean, also can shift depending on what other cards come up, so it's not really something you can study and be like, I've got it. It's a lot of also connecting with your intuition and your guides as you're doing the reading, because the cards shift meaning. To be very brief with it, it's kind of a story of separating of consciousness separating from the one, and then going as far as possible into separation, and then integrating back into the one. And that's kind of the story that the cards tell, and they tell that story through galactic history, looking at different themes and challenges and gifts of different galactic lineages and star lineages through time. Yeah, it's really wild stuff. It's so fascinating.
It sounds fascinating. And what you said about discernment and that resonance, really knowing what is for you through that, instead of just being, they're showing you like a colander that you like literally put like everything through your field, through your lens. And when I saw the image, one of the cards that you posted, I was like, oh my God, what is this? Because like I see a lot of light language, and a lot of the time I'm like, no, 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 no. When I saw that, I was like, oh yes. Who is this person? And yeah, so that was one thing that you touched on. And the other thing, for anyone listening, anyone who is new to this, a lot of us, when we get into this field, well, first of all, many of us from childhood, we could look up at the sky and we knew there's Orion, there's Sirius, there's Pleiades. Like we have that connection, right? And as we have gone through spiritual awakening, we shed a lot of our labels and a lot of our stuff. And as we empty and release, we tend to want to find new ones and attach new ones to ourselves. So there's a tendency a lot of the time to say, I'm from Pleiades, I am from Sirius. And I know you and I have talked about this before, but it's really important to remember that you're a fractal of source, and you have had experiences you are having. It's all happening now. It's all parallel. It's all over the place. And it's not just one. If you had just one, I think that would be kind of sad, because it's really exciting to know all those places and have experienced it all. That's the other piece I want everyone, as we continue our conversation, to remember. And the third is a question: are we like on the furthest away from source as it gets on the spectrum of separation? Like,
I think so. It's actually funny because I've been watching, Lisa also had a series of videos where she talks about the cards, and there's a middle card. It's card number 54. And this video series was recorded several years ago, but she was channeling Jermaine, and Jermaine said, this is where humanity is, which is like the farthest away. It's the midpoint.
yeah.
And then it's a return from here. And like, that isn't to say like, oh, the return starts tomorrow. And actually, for a lot of us, we're kind of getting glimpses and connecting to the next step. I should get it out to say exactly what that was, but it was, I think, belief systems is number 54, and it is where we get the most entrenched in our belief systems. I'm right, you're wrong. This is the good side. This is the bad side, good versus evil, and you're like very entrenched. It's also the hardest evolutionary stage to move through because you're so attached. But as we move through that, we start to get glimpses of what's coming next. And obviously, card number 54, and of course, it's not this linear, and it's not, okay, step by step. That's not how this stuff works, but our minds understand it this way. But card number 54, there's still 54 more cards to go, so it's like, it's a journey back. We're beginning a journey, we're initiating, and we're kind of in that initiatory point right now of like working through this really tough lesson of everything you judge in someone else is it's like you're looking in a mirror, but we can't. And this could be on an individual level, on a collective level, on a social level, on a political level, whatever it is. And this is really tough pill to swallow, a really tough lesson to learn. And like, I can sit here and say this, but I'm still, it's not something I've mastered in any kind of way. I'm still, I get sucked back into it.
An hour. Yeah. And when you said it's not linear, everything spirals, right? So that's what I was seeing too. And what I was hearing yesterday is they've had to turn the volume because we weren't going through it fast enough. You'd think that like with COVID, we would speed up through that, like from 54 to 55. No, didn't happen. That a lot of the, like, in order for us to see light and want to go to light when we are in that like densest, most like attached to our narratives, our belief systems, they had to turn the black and white, they had to turn the contrast on higher so that you're not just complacent being in the grayscale. So like you're like really seeing and seeing that the two opposing sides, like they're both kind of wrong. Like there's no winner in any of it. I wonder what card 55 is. Like if we can,
I have it right here. Let me grab it.
I'm also I'm going to link this deck and the videos, because if you're interested, this is a Lisa and Kat approved rabbit hole to go down because a lot of rabbit holes I have personally gone through, and I would say I do not recommend it. Stay out.
Yeah. Stay anchored and grounded. One of my things I always recommend, and has been so important for me with even exploring these topics, is because it's so outside of our kind of like dominant culture worldview or perception of reality. It can dissolve those boundaries of reality so quickly that you become really destabilized and really disoriented. And then you can kind of be susceptible to any kind of message, any kind of illusion, and copy and pasting, like you said, more labels, more illusion, more of the same into a new format. So it's very important to ground, to like connect, do something outside, take a break from reading, spend time with your kids, whatever, just like eat some ice cream, do something really earth-based.
So bizarre. I just had the craziest deja vu. Like this is so bizarre. And this has been happening a lot. And they actually told me this morning, watch out, like a lot of really weird stuff you'll start observing. But I swear, I was like, we've had this conversation on video, like this has happened, like what is happening here? So, major glitch. When
It's a
two
little
witches get
wink.
together, major glitch.
It's
Ooh,
it's a little wink and nod, because in the Matrix movie when there's deja vu, it's a literal glitch in the Matrix. It's kind of funny. Okay, so I looked. So Earth is so 53 is actually belief systems, and then 54 is new consciousness, and it's when we start to shift out of that into that awareness of a new consciousness and moving.
yeah.
It's like a little in breath or out breath, however you want to think of it. It's like, okay, we're coming out of the contraction and starting to go. But again, it's not a linear, it's all going to be smooth, because that's just not how this stuff works. But our brains understand it more linearly.
And I think I can already hear a lot of people are asking, what's the quotient? What's like the light quotient? Because so many of us are like, there is an amount of people pulling towards light, right? And it's, again, it's not, that's our linear minds trying to create like a percentage of like a certain thing, right? And I'm also seeing the heart, like it's the heart consciousness. It's the unlocking, choosing something different, choosing sovereignty, choosing connection, to develop a connection of your own, choosing intuition, choosing.
And something I've been thinking about with that, and actually talking to my guides about it, and I did a channeling session just to ask my guide, like, what about this? Because something that's been bothering me is like the unfairness of it all. And that's my human self, of like, how come I live in a place in the world where I have access to these tools and I'm able to do these things, and I am able to shift my consciousness, and I am able to do these things, and then how come other people, and we don't have to name specifics, but are maybe trapped in certain areas of the world where they literally can't do those things? And a lot of times when people talk about this, or even channel stuff about this, it is unsatisfactory to me, because it's like, yeah, okay, reality is, you're making your own reality, you're creating all this stuff. And I believe that on like a big scale, but what about the small scale? And my guides kind of explained to me that, let's see if I can translate this well, because it came through in a channeled state, but basically there's like, in certain areas of the world, there's forces of power that are so dense and so gridlocked that it's almost like a black hole. And it's like people that are in that vicinity are almost like sucked into that consciousness and can't get out of it. And it's not their fault. They're not creating their reality. They're like sucked into this magnetic pull of this sort of like black hole density. Because think of like a black hole is like the densest thing in reality. And so those of us who are outside of that vicinity, it becomes even more imperative, even if it's not fair, for us to free ourselves as much as possible, do this work of like bringing that spaciousness, that lightness, clearing that density from our field. Because when we do that, and the more of us that do that, and the more of us that spread, that literally loosens the density of that black hole area. So I don't know if that resonates with you or makes sense
I'm
with you,
going
but
to translate it with another visual. So when you said gridlock, it was like, and this is why so many are doing the grid work. The way that it was shown to me when you were saying the shaking, I was literally seeing like stomping your heels onto the earth and putting these like rods, these like acupuncture needles, and shaking it. And because it's not just like the way that the control bubble is created, it's also using the like the forces of the earth, disconnecting it from the grids, disconnecting it from everything else, like creating truly like these snow globes where it's like it's stuck. And that's what, when you said gridlock, I was like, oh my gosh, that is the grids that we're trying to push that light, like in a body, like,
yes,
like cancer
when
cells,
you
like tumors, all the things growing. It's like, and what is needed is those acupuncture needles that connect to the right meridian and push the light through and push the enough light to where it truly is like a blast and there's nothing. Yeah. And this is why they're saying, and it's why it's your duty, and why so many of you feel that duty and feel like I don't have a choice, because it's not the ego creating that story. It's truly like when you, before you incarnated here, the council, your soul, your higher self, all of that was like ingrained into you, that you are to be that acupuncture needle above all else. Like this is your work.
And there's a lot of narratives out there and suggestions, I would say, where doing this kind of work and insisting on doing this kind of work with ourselves and our spheres is almost being framed as selfish or disconnected or even like detached from reality. Do you know what I'm saying? And I really firmly believe that narrative, and almost like, it's not about putting your head in the sand and ignoring what's happening. You have to kind of hold that that's what's happening and root even more fiercely into those needles, those, the acupuncture needles that you're anchoring into this planet, and doing that work. Even though it's uncomfortable because it can almost seem like you're talking about in a way that's really unrelatable, or in a way that's really not speaking from that reality where that density is happening. It's not ignoring it, but it's I kind of feel like the attempt to shut it down is an attempt to keep us anchored in that reality. It's not about ignoring it or shutting it out or tuning it out. It's about being like, yes, this is happening, and that's why this is even more essential for me to be doing right now. And you have to be able to hold backs. And I think that's what a lot of us are being invited into. It's an evolution of this kind of work, because I do think there have been times, and there still are people who want to be like, la la la, we're not looking at that because it's not high vibe. And this is deeper than that. This is like, I'm doing this for this on a level that can't really be understood by the conscious mind or by dominant culture. I feel like I'm off on a tangent now. I kind of lost
we talk about this all the time, that part of that awareness and part of that expansion that we're going through is to be able to hold both sides of it, right? Like both perspectives, and also to see all of it with compassion. The people who come at you, the people who are, but still hold it unapologetically, and with your, like, truly, like that core of, and they're saying like increasing the size of the needle so that it's like more light. It's like a jackhammer. It's not an acupuncture needle. I think this is why so many of us who feel connected to this, who feel called to it, like, it's very underground in many ways. It's like you kind of look for your people, your one person, and then you find your network, and then you kind of, hey, have you heard of this? And it kind of connects. And then when you find your people, it's like, oh, my people. It's safe.
I could talk about this stuff and not.
Okay, so I wanted to talk about all things. If you have an idea of what you see for us as a society reconnecting to and unlocking the whole, like, starseed children, starseed, like, soul tribes reuniting, what would be, if we were to hold this vision for how that portion of our evolution unfolds? Do you have any visions around, not any visions as a clairvoyant, but as someone who dreams it into being? What would that be like?
There's actually a card in the Galactic Heritage cards. It's a future Earth card, and it's called Melting Pot. And it's kind
Hold
of
on,
about
what
this.
number is it? What number? How far are we
It
from
is.
that card?
Where
And I know,
is
remember,
it?
it's not linear, it's a spiral.
Right.
So is it like
I
something or is it like a 90 something?
I think it's in the, oh yeah, it's 75.
Okay, that's doable.
So it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, and yeah, it's just basically kind of like what we have, I think that what we have tried to say as a melting pot is kind of like a very tiny echo of it. It's like a glimpse of it, or like a whisper of it, or even like the seed or the code of it. But it's like the actual expressed reality of it. So to me, what that means is that we are kind of fully integrated as humans. We're integrating our sacred with our divine, our star lineage with our earth lineage. We are not expecting homogeny or conformity. It's a multiplicitous expression of reality, a prismatic expression of reality. It's trusting people with themselves and trusting that they bring that individuality in service of the group. So it's like holding all of these polarities and these opposites and these maybe yeah, like what we see now as like my view and your view with grace, and like bringing it together, and there's no more fighting about whose opinion is right. It's trusting their own journey, their own soul. I see that as like a great need right now, is and what a great lesson with this belief system lesson that we're going through right now is that a big part of it is many people trying to be responsible for other people, and you're just not and I don't mean like, oh, you're not responsible for your children, things like this. Like you're offended by something someone thinks and says, and so you feel it is your responsibility to make them change what they say. And so in this melting pot reality, we trust people with themselves, and we trust ourselves with ourselves, and we express our individuality from a grounded, heart-centered place that is about following our excitement, following our joy, following our uniqueness and our curiosity, but from a heart-led place, not an ego-led place. That's just like a glimpse. I don't know if that sparks anything for you.
No, I love it. I love it. And the piece about not trying to change or control anyone, control anybody's belief systems. And a lot of the time it's an escape from looking at yourself in the mirror, looking at your own inner stuff. And yeah, we're misplacing a lot of what we believe, with that righteous trying to fix this world and one person at a time and all the things. And we see it on a small scale with just one person in our circle and all of the social media, just, the vomiting that we witness with people, and then on a larger scale, of course. And obviously I agree with all things you said about heart, because that really is I know that to be the way. Like I see hearts as these spirals when they get activated. It's almost like these Stargate spirals that open, that communicate to source directly. And my hope is that that card 75 or whatever that number, that like I hope it happens in the next 50 years. I selfishly, as Kat, I would really like to witness it with like being
I know.
witnessing it. But I think a lot of like people who wake up to all of this, the star seeds, they always say, this is my last lifetime. I'm so done here. I'm so done here. And like I used to say that too, but there's a part of me that says, but I really want to experience that, because being here in this physicality and moving from that card 53 or whatever to that next point of this new version of Earth, right? This new version of the society, of civilization, of humanity. I mean, I know it's possible. I have to believe it's possible.
I
Right.
think it would be amazing to be here if we lived in
Yeah.
that kind of reality. I think what's so hard about density is, and being in this dense point of Earth history, is that we feel, I think we have like one foot in that reality, and we know it's happening, we know it's coming, and it's like, but it could be so amazing. And our human selves get really impatient, but it's like a process that has to happen in order to be able to get to that point, because we really can't get to that point until we've brought all the stuff we've been suppressing and burying and ignoring and brought that up to the surface to see. And I think that goes back to that piece of, it's not a denial of what's happening, it's a witnessing. We're witnessing what's happening and doing our part to integrate it at the same time, which is a real trick. It's really tricky for our human selves to do that. And one other thing you said about when you're reacting to something someone else is saying, or feeling like you have to control them or whatever, something that I've been really noticing lately is that when I feel the most triggered by something someone is saying, it's almost always a way I have been at some point in my life. Maybe I don't consciously think of myself as that way, or I don't want to think of myself as having that in me. For
Shame
example, like
residue.
several
Like
years,
shame
yeah,
residue. Yeah.
yeah, like for example, like a few years ago, I was very caught up in the polarized, like us, them, right, wrong, and I was posting online about it, and I keep getting Facebook memories about things I was saying, and I like want to delete it because I'm like, no, I don't want to, like, I don't think that way anymore, but I'm leaving it as almost this reminder of like, don't be so like arrogant that you think you could never get caught up in this. Like I've been, and I do still, and so it's like such a humbling, not in a bad way, but humbling of like, we're all moving through this. And when I get the most activated is usually when I'm really not wanting to see that thing in me, like you said.
Yeah. It's like shame residue that we have to forgive to really, and not like in a, oh, bless your heart, you're still stuck in that, but truly like from a place of like, oh gosh, that, yeah. And when you get to the other side and you get to clear that, you're going to feel so much more free and light and just sleep so much better in so many ways, because it's like it eats
Mhm.
at you. It eats at you because you truly believe that that is the only way, right? And it's like it's a tug of war. Like you're always in a tug of war with something, and you're always looking for someone, like a dog with, I have two dogs. One of them always wants to play tug of war, and the other one is like, no, no, no thanks. And it's and I feel like so many of us, humanity has that like inflammation and has that instinct to like, I can feel better, I can alleviate that by the response of like winning in this tug of war or whatever, whatever it is. It's it's a journey. This evolution journey is no joke. Going from that densest, I'm going to use that as a reference now, from like card 53 to back to light. So it's no joke. We definitely came here for some fun expansion experiences to write on our future resumes, soul resumes. Whew.
Sometimes I'm like, really? Now? Like, this is what you had to see? Like, come on.
Yeah. 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 Well, and you and I, before we
Good
started
stuff.
recording, we were saying how things have changed from maybe 20 years ago, when it would have been very strange for two regular moms with kids, all the things, going to school, going to grocery store, all the things, to be having these conversations and like really normalizing it, and like not hiding it, not running away from it, and like really owning it and being in that frequency. And I know somebody listening to this is going to say, I really want that. Like, you can have it. you can start little by little, like integrating piece by piece, speaking with people that feel safe, and then expanding that circle. What would you say to
I
someone?
still, yeah, I mean, I don't think it's all or nothing. There's a lot of people in my regular life who know this stuff about me. It's not a secret, but there's certain people it's not necessary to bring it up. We're just
Yeah.
not,
No.
it's not, I don't have to go there. It's not hiding it, but I'm like, we just don't need to go there. But in terms of getting more comfortable, because if I look back, say to 2019, when I started my Instagram account to now, there is no way I could imagine, I could barely imagine going online and talking about being a witch or liking witchy stuff. Like, there's no way I could have even imagined at that point that I would ever be talking about things like aliens or multidimensional consciousness or galactic history, like maybe having a secret fascination, but never publicly talking about it. And I feel like for me, it has been in increments that my nervous system could handle. And doing one scary thing at a time, expanding my capacity for what even feels scary. For me, starting my separate Instagram account where I could talk about witchy stuff was one of those little incremental steps. I'm like, this is a separate space. It feels safe. Nobody knows me here. Some people from my regular life found me on there. Sometimes if there were people that I felt like would be really like, I would just remove them. After a while, I stopped doing that. It was just in the beginning. I was like, maybe I don't want to be worrying about what they're thinking about. But it's been incremental from there. There was a certain point I started posting about the tarot cards I was pulling daily in my stories. And that was something that would have felt really weird and uncomfortable. And after like a month of doing that, I realized I kind of expanded my capacity, my nervous system capacity for what felt uncomfortable. It didn't feel weird anymore. And then what was the next step? Oh, let's share this ritual I did, or let's talk about the moon, or now we're going to start. And it just expanded and got bigger and bigger. And then for me at this current phase of my life, this sort of like galactic awakening where it's been really conscious has been happening over the last year and a half. And I only just last week got brave enough to directly talk about it. I've been kind of like embedding it or like talking about it sideways or through my corner of my mouth, or with in little small group things, but never openly talking about it on my Instagram. And I just started doing that like probably a couple weeks ago. And that felt really terrifying. But even going through that next edge, I'm like, wow, I feel really free. Like I can talk about this stuff. And there's still probably going to be edges in the future and expansions. And I feel like if you look at like maybe someone that you really admire in who's talking about these things and you're like, man, I could never do that. You're not being asked to do that right now. Just like, what's the smallest thing that feels like an edge that you can kind of do, but that doesn't feel too terrifying to your nervous system? You kind of reacclimate yourself to what feels okay. And every little edge brings up new things to process. And as you process them, it becomes a non-issue. Like the fact that like my whole entire family my parents still aren't interested in me ever talking about this stuff, but my husband's family all know that I'm a witch now. And it's like normal stuff. They'll bring it up at dinner conversations. They're like, oh yeah, Lisa's a witch. Like it's a non-issue. But I could never have imagined that 4 years, like in 2019, that this could just be something that we could talk about at the family dinner table as if it's normal.
Yeah, I mean what you said about nervous system, like 100%. And I also think when you get to that next platform, that next step, and you start speaking about it, there is that element of like, oh, I hope nobody sees this. Like there's that element of like, I'm putting it out there, but like, oh, like let's just hope that like maybe 10 people see it. But you kind of want them to see it, but you kind of don't. And yeah, and then you keep going and you gain more voice, more power, and you're like, no, I actually do want people to see me this way, and not in a way of like this is my new identity, but as I'm here to normalize this. I really am, and this is the way to to keep putting it out there. And I know exactly what you said about the people from your who know you in real life, who are your neighbors or school kids, school friends, parents, whatever. I've definitely had, when I was speaking about the lower end stuff of this, the more mindfulness and unlocking your creativity with reconnecting to your intuition through creativity, all those things. I've had several not just follow me, but subscribe to my email newsletters. And then as they progressively got crazier, I've seen people unfollow. And I'm always like, thank you for helping me clean up my newsletter to where it's like people who are 100% on board with like this version of me, because that's ultimately what we want. We want to feel free, like you said, to like be, and it's like that, like prism again. It's like I'm seeing like a disco ball. I want all the facets of my disco ball to be honored and on and seen and like to feel, yeah. And everyone that we admire, that we see who is doing some form of work that we aspire to do or whatever it is, again, it's remembering they didn't hatch yesterday and come out. Some people do, some people do, but I find that a lot of the time, like some of the energy is not quite like it's not in resonance with me because they didn't have a similar journey. I think a lot of the time the people we really connect to is people who've had similar kind of spiral journeys to us and who are also in similar life places as us in the like the 3D level, right? We're like, oh, we connect to that person because there is more common ground of sorts. Like I can really, like, how different would this be if you were single in your 20s and you were living in a place where you were surrounded, like Bali, you were like surrounded by everyone, I mean, it would be, or Costa Rica or somewhere, not in a suburb or with kids and all the, and a partner who knew you before you even started loving tarot, and like not even to mention all this other stuff. Yeah, it's very, yeah, but our resonance attracts us to each other, right? Like that's how we connect, we find our peeps.
Two things you said gave me thoughts. One is the hardest part for me. So when I started this account, I specifically started it to talk about witchy stuff and alternative stuff, tarot, psychic work. None of that felt, as I grew the account over time, it's been like a slow growth process, for me over there. That stuff, it felt like an edge. It continued to feel less and less like an edge. But the hardest piece for me was when things started to get more galactic. Like that is a place that even people who are into witchy stuff or astrology or tarot, like they're not all necessarily going to be willing to go there. And that I think scared me the most, was that it was a new edge that was like, not, if people were paying attention, it wasn't going to be a total diversion from what I had been talking about, but it was a little bit different of a realm. And I was really afraid, like, oh, I'm going to lose my entire audience, like that I've built. Like it's the ego coming in of like, oh God, like they're all going to like go away and I'm going to have to start over, which now that I've taken this leap and I see how I feel so much more attuned to my truth and so much more free, I don't care if they all went and I had to start over, because now I'm at least saying what I want to be saying. And I did lose like probably 60 to 70 followers. And kind of every time I post a new one, maybe somebody who hasn't seen it yet, like I lose a couple here and there, but I'm really seeing this time as a recalibration and a distillation. It feels actually really empowering. Even I thought I would be so upset when my follower count went down, but I actually feel like, oh, now the people who don't want to hear this stuff are going and the people who do are staying, and I feel so free. So that's a pretty cool thing. And it's really hard for the ego to wrap around that, because the ego just wants to like accumulate the numbers and keep them all, like they're objects. But they're not. And also coming into that sovereignty piece, like anyone in my space is free to come and go. And part of that belief system thing is learning, like, I'm here to share, I'm not here to convince. And so if something I'm sharing isn't resonating with you, that's not personal, and you can go and be somewhere that is, and I'm going to keep talking to the people that it's resonating for.
Right. The highest,
Yeah.
only in the quantity and the amount needed for your expansion, for your evolution, for what your consciousness can handle at this time, what you need. And ultimately, like, there are teachers that it's so interesting that you felt that way about all the galactic stuff, because to me that was almost like the first and most natural thing, and not necessarily for me to talk about, but I also didn't have fear about it. My guidance was like, share this channeled message and say it's from the energy of love, because you don't need to know who it came from, and they don't need to know, because like we're always like, well, who are you channeling? Who are you channeling? And it's like, why does it matter? Like, that was my guide's perspective from the beginning. They would say, we're not giving you the name, just know us as the energy of love. And then I'd be like, I'm seeing something, I think it's a ship. Oh, it's an Arcturian ship. I know who you are. Got you. Like, it became this game, but I still wouldn't say out who the message was from. And 2 years ago, I think no, maybe longer than that. I started kind of putting it out there, but I didn't have a resistance or reservations, or because I don't know, that just wasn't. I think I had other things, but that wasn't one of them. I think I had, like, for me it was because I do like space clearing and energy work, and for me it was like the darker entities. I kind of didn't want to go there, talking about like removing all of that. And yeah, I don't know, it's interesting, like how each of us has these. And you do quantum hypnosis, so I'm sure that comes up for people, like where that block, what it's connected to, and helping people clear that. Speaking of that, how can people work with you? Where can they find you?
Yeah, so they can go to theglitchwitch.com. That's my website. I am going to be kind of like rearranging it in the coming months, but they can find everything there. My Instagram at the.glitch.witch. Couldn't get it without the dots. You can find booking links for the Galactic Heritage readings and quantum hypnosis. A lot of times, it's kind of fun to do a Galactic Heritage reading as like a taste of what you might experience in quantum hypnosis, which is something it's so hard to describe to people sometimes, but I'm so obsessed with it. The level of growth I've done myself since I've started having my quantum hypnosis sessions, seeing different past or parallel lives or other timelines, has been just so healing, because it also has showed me. I had a recent one actually, like a couple days before I posted my big Starseed post, where I saw where the wound of being shamed for living my truth and being visible for it, where it originated. And it was not on Earth. It was like a very long time ago. That's a story for another day. But it's like so powerful, because once you kind of see this, it starts to let you get to that root of whatever. Like, I just feel like I've always been afraid of speaking my truth, and you can attribute it to childhood, you can do inner child work, but sometimes it's deeper than that or older than that, and it's really powerful. And then also sometimes it can help you just see, like I connected with what I can only describe as a parallel consciousness, who is me but not me, and is not of this dimension. And since I connected with her, she's been channeling more directly to me, which has been wild. So you just never know what's going to come up in a quantum hypnosis session, but it is always going to be what your higher self knows you are ready to see, and what you need to see to kind of move through what you're going through right now. But it's all directed by your higher self and your guides and your star teams and things like this. So it's always going to be exactly what you need. Yeah.
And all the details are in the show notes, so people can find you there and follow you, and also on Substack, because you write on Substack.
Oh yeah, I always forget to.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that will be also in the show notes. And is there anything else you'd like to leave us with today? Any last thoughts, last advice for someone on this journey? And I'm feeling like somebody who is like, I think it's similar fear to you, the fear of being seen fully, but like that desire, and it's like the desire is stronger, but like they're like, it's like push and pull again. Oops. You know what that
Well, maybe it was a little
glitch?
low. Yeah, it was funny because one of the things I was going to say earlier, but didn't, we started talking about something else, is this piece on having these kinds of awarenesses and pulls and calls when you're living kind of like a normal quote unquote life with as a mom with kids. I think especially important to talk about as someone who's married and how maybe knows only a small percentage of this of you. I think a big fear. So I've always been into this stuff, and I'm not going to go on a huge tangent, but I'll just say this. I feel like it's important. I was on this path before I met my husband. I was exploring yoga. I was doing all this stuff with astral projection and energy work. And then around the time I met my husband, it was around just after my Saturn return or just during. And a lot of that stuff kind of went below the surface because I had some human things I had to work through for a while. And so at the time I met my husband, like he knew these things about me. He knew I was into yoga. He knew that I had tarot cards because they would be on my desk. He knew that I liked astrology because one of the first texts I sent him was something about Taurus and Aquarius, which is us. So it wasn't like it was a secret, but it wasn't the forefront of my identity. And so a thing that really held me back for a long time, because at this point now we've been together since 2013, so 11 years. And it started to come in 2019. So we had been together 6 years at that point, where I was like, this can't be a hidden secret part of my identity anymore. I have to start talking about this, being open about it. And one of the things I was most afraid of was, will my husband still love me? Will my husband accept this part of me? I was so afraid and terrified to show that. And I know everybody's situation is going to be different, but I will say that in my experience, and my husband is an amazing person, very earthy, earth all up in his chart. He's a very like grounded, like earth focused human. This life now, we're doing this now, like isn't really worried about what's happening out there, is really just focused on living this life and living it well, which actually I think is really complementary and helps me stay balanced and grounded, but not into this stuff at all. And I was like, what is going to happen if all of a sudden my super grounded, earthy husband has this alien witch wife that he wasn't prepared to have? Will he still love me? Will he abandon me? Will he reject me? And I will say that in my experience, my imagination and fears was a million times worse than what actually happened. In fact, when I started talking about this stuff with him and kind of like incrementally like sharing and starting to be more open, most of the time he was like, yeah, I know, I already know this about you, or that's cool that you think that. And he knows that I don't like expect him to agree. Sometimes I just want to share a weird thought. He doesn't have to accept it as his reality in the same way, but all I really cared about was not being rejected and abandoned. And obviously that's outside of our control, but in my experience, my imagination was so much worse than what actually happened. He just was like, okay, I've always known you're weird and I love that about you. Okay, next. Like, you know.
Amazing. And I find that it's by design that so many of us, and in these conversations it comes up a lot, the partner stuff, that we do have Taurus, Capricorn, Capricorn, Capricorn. Like I hear it over and over and over. My husband is like a double Capricorn with, Taurus, all the things, all the
I think
things.
my husband's like Taurus, Capricorn, Virgo for
Yeah,
his top
yeah,
three. It's like,
yeah. And it's not our first lifetimes together, and they keep us grounded, and they create that network of support that's needed, right? And they don't realize it, but they are very, very that too. They're very galactic too. As much as I could go and point out Sirius, Orion, Pleiades, the one star that my husband would pick out looking at the sky is Vega in Lyra constellation. And I see him, I look at him, I see like this lion, this white lion all the time. I'm like,
I just got chills because in that quantum hypnosis session I just had that I told you about, it was not exactly Lyra, but it was a Lyra offshoot. And in that life, I was with my husband. It was him, and he was actually the kind of like revolutionary, like fiery spirit, kind of like fighting against the establishment. And I saw, oh, he, whether he wants to accept this or not is fine, but I saw that he kind of specifically, he's like been doing a lot of that type of stuff, and he specifically came to this incarnation to have a calmer, more grounded earth experience. But also I've seen that we've reversed roles in different lifetimes, and in this lifetime he's there to be an anchor for me. And I also find that it's so, a lot of times when we start coming into these awakenings or these awarenesses, where it's like, oh, what if I had this like breath worker husband, or like, and I actually, the deeper I go into this work, the more I'm like, thank gods that I have this man who is all earth and not thinking about that stuff, because he gives me like a orientation point.
yeah.
And not in a codependent way, but in a way where it's like, I need that grounded, just normal human life to return to sometimes, because it can be so disorienting, and it's a stabilization point for me to be able to kind of go off into these places but not become completely untethered. So I think that's an important thing to think about, because it can become this fantasy of like, what if we were doing all this stuff together and I actually feel like it's so by design that that's not the way it is. And it's almost like essential for a lot of us to have this, almost like this rock energy when we're doing this kind of work and having these awarenesses. And I know that everybody's situation is different, but I would encourage people to, again, thinking of that nervous system thing, small little things. Like I started by just taking the tarot cards out in the bed and shuffling them and pulling a card. And he was fine, like no reaction. In fact, he was like, hey, want to pull one for me? I was like, oh, really? And then it just kind of expanded from there. And then the other key piece was not trying to convert him. And getting out of that energy of like trying to convert. I'm not doing that. Like that, he can have his own experience of reality. It doesn't have to be in mine, as long as he's supporting me,
Yeah. I'm all about relationships. I have I'm Awake, They're Not workshop, where like the big takeaway I want everyone to walk away with is that we are here to be witnesses to each other's unfolding, and that we have to have respect for the timing of this unfolding, the way that, and we're also here to witness the beauty that's in all of us, our partners, our children, our parents, our neighbors, everyone, the humanity that's in them, their hearts, when they're not conscious, like how beautiful and kind and loving all of these people are, without like really being connected and being told by their guides that they need to be that. I think there's so much beauty in that, it's like we're not all, all lost at 53. Maybe we're at 54 already.
Yeah.
Oh, Lisa, we could talk for hours. We could talk.
I know. We'll have to talk again.
We will, absolutely. Thank you so much for being here, Lisa, and thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please review, subscribe, and until next time, thank you.